Hey everyone, this is Mrs. Youngman, and this is my first attempt of making my own math video. So I hope you can enjoy, and I hope that you can pause and rewind and learn a lot from this. So we are starting chapter 1 of geometry, and before we begin, you need to know that there are 3 undefined terms. What that means is all of these terms that we're going to learn into the future are based upon these 3 things that we say are undefined, but they're only undefined because we don't have background things to be able to define them from. So those 3 undefined terms, the first one is point. So I'll write that over here, point, and we can see that here we have a point, and we're going to call this point A. And that's actually exactly how you would label it. And eventually we'll get to the point where we might just use a capital letter A to reference points. But for right now, I'm going to write point A. A point is just a location in space. It doesn't take up any size, doesn't have any shape. It would be almost like a fine piece of dust that you see floating in the sky. At least I see them when I look through the windows. If it's a sunny day, I see little dust particles in space. Each one of those would be an individual point. So the next undefined term is actually line. I know you've talked about lines a lot in Algebra 1. You've graphed lines. We say that a line has 1 dimension. It has length as a dimension. And you have to have at least 2 points to define where a line is. So some different ways that we can name this line over here to the side. We could name this line PQ, and we put a little line on top of it. We could also name it line QP. Or a third way to name this particular line is by using this little lowercase scripted letter off to the side. I could simply call this line M. And you kind of try to make it a little scripted, and that'd be a lowercase letter. These other ones need to be capital letters because they're referring to point P and point Q, and you always use a capital letter when you're referring to a point. And then the last of our 3 undefined terms is a plane. So this is a plane, meaning it has 2 dimensions. It has width and length, but no thickness. It would kind of be like the very thinnest piece of paper that you could have. If you extended that out into space forever, that would be a plane, or maybe like the top of your tabletop, or the smartboard would be a plane. You need at least 3 points to define a plane. So this plane over here, I could use any of these 3 points in any order. And since this one only has 3, I would simply just name this like B, C, D. Or if you wanted, you could say C, A, D, or any order of those 3 letters. And also for this one here, it has a capital scripted letter off in the very corner of it. A third way to name this would be to name it plane K. And I'm just going to kind of make that scripted when I write it to let you know that it's not just referring to point. K is not a point. It's referring to that whole plane. Okay. A few other things that you need to know, and I will just write them. Actually, I'll go ahead and write them on the next page here. A couple of terms that are defined now. We have collinear and coplanar. And we'll be referring to especially collinear quite a bit. Collinear means you have points on the same line. So for example, in this picture here, I could say that point V, W, and X are collinear. They're all on the same line. So points V, W, and X are collinear. Okay, and you always have to use 3 points if you're referring to things that are collinear, because any 2 points could be collinear themselves. Like if I'm looking here at T and Z, there could be a line that connected those 2 points. The line's not on this picture, but there could be one there. Because whenever you have 2 points, you can always have a line connecting them. So you need to have at least 3 points to say if they're all collinear. Coplanar would be points, or they could also be lines and other things that are on the same plane. And if you're talking about things being coplanar, you need at least 4 points, because any 3 points could be on the same plane, because it takes 3 points to define a plane. So if I'm looking at this, I could say points V, let's say W, Z, and Y are coplanar, because they're all on the same plane, and that plane, you could call that plane P, or you could name it with 3 of those points, but you wouldn't want those 3 points to be all on that same line, because there could be more than the plane that just goes through those. Okay, a few other things. We need to talk about the intersection. So the intersection when you're referring to 2 lines, so the intersection for 2 lines, the place where those 2 things meet, 2 lines always intersect at 1 point. So for this one here, I would say that line L and M intersect at point P. And notice how I'm using lowercase scripted letters to describe those lines, and then a capital letter P to be describing the intersection of those 2 lines, this point right here. When you have 2 planes, 2 planes always intersect at 1 line. So in this case here, I could say that plane B and A intersect at line R. Okay, and we'll be talking a lot about this more. I know in Algebra 1, when you guys solved system of equations, you had 2 lines, and if they did have an intersection, they intersected at 1 point. You could always have 2 parallel lines that aren't going to intersect at all, but when they do intersect, there is 1 unique point for that. Or the same thing with planes. If planes are going to intersect, they're going to intersect along 1 line, as drawn in here. Okay, and then for our last bit of information, you are going to be asked in this section to draw some pictures. So I just kind of wanted to show you how maybe you could make some pictures of 3-dimensional space on your 2-dimensional piece of paper. So this first picture here is already kind of drawn for you. Whenever you're asked to draw a plane, the way that you'll see that is you'll see it drawn like a parallelogram. And if you have a ruler, that's fine. If you don't, I'm not going to be too picky if you just kind of sketch it in. If points are on that plane, the way that you're going to show that those points are on the plane is you're just going to draw them within that parallelogram. And you could then name them. Let's say we needed to name these points like A, B, and C. And then let's say that you have a point that's not on that plane. You could either draw that someplace below or someplace above that. If you were to think of this as being like your tabletop, this would be a point, someplace above that. And in this picture here, they're showing that line RS intersects plane T at only 1 point S. And if I wanted to do the same type of thing over here, I might call this point D, And then I could show that this line DC intersects that at only one place, and that would be point C. Okay, down here we have a pentagonal pyramid, and that pentagonal base is on plane X. I would say that line LM intersects plane X at one point, point L. If I didn't want to call this plane X, there would be a number of different names that I could give to it. I would just have to pick any three of these points that are on that plane. So I could mix it up and I could say like J, E, L, and that could be the name of this plane. Okay, lots of other options for that too. Some other questions might be things like, are J, K, and D collinear? And yes, those three things are on the same line, so you could say that yes, J, K, and D are collinear. But are J, H, and G collinear? And the answer to that would be no, because they don't form a perfectly straight line. So I hope this has been helpful. I will be checking in with you guys in class to see what questions you may have, and then we'll be working on some of the assignments and stuff together too. So I will make sure that you get any questions answered. And as always, feel free if you need to ever pause this or go back, if you need to draw one of the pictures, and I kind of already had it on there, feel free to just pause it and make sure you have this information down. I'm looking forward to making videos for you guys, and hopefully this is a great tool for you. See you later. Bye.